Hello, my name is David Hawkins. I am director and founder at the University Guys, and this session is to give you some overview information about international universities. The University Guys are a team of specialists in international university applications. Similar to paying for music lessons or sports coaching, we are a service that a family can work with to get additional help on top of what your school provides if you want to do something slightly different with your university applications. If after this recorded presentation you'd like to find out some more about what we do, please get in touch. My email is david@theuniversityguys.com. Now, lots of students at schools in the UK do choose to go to an international university. About 5% of all independent school council leavers decides to make that step. And what you can see here is a sample snapshot of our students who finished school in 2023 of where they have got offers that we have supported them with, both students from the UK going outside the UK for university and international students choosing to come to the UK. So it's a popular thing that more and more students are choosing to do. But what we have to remember is that around the world, not every university system is going to work in the same way as it does in the UK. And so important here is to understand a little analogy that we use to try and explain how, in exactly the same way as the word university can mean different things in different parts of the world, so can another word chips. And if you imagine walking down a high street somewhere in the world, popping into a shop, saying to the person behind the counter, "Can I have some chips, please?" Depending on where you were in the world, you might be given these, or these, or these, or these. Same question, same word, but a different outcome depending on the cultural context. And exactly the same is true of that idea of university. Asking someone in America, what do you do at university? How is a university good? How do I apply to university? When do I need to start thinking about applying to university? We'll get a very different answer than if you ask those questions of someone in the United Kingdom or someone in Canada or somewhere in continental Europe. And so what we've got to understand is that applying to international universities is not the same as applying to universities in the United Kingdom. And broadly speaking, at the University Guys, we see 4 reasons why international universities are different from the experience we find here in the United Kingdom. Firstly, the way in which students go about choosing their universities is different. Secondly, the thing that you will be going to university to do, your studies, can be quite different in terms of the range of subjects. How you assess the quality of a university can also be quite different. And then finally, how you go about making those applications. And I'm going to run through each of these in turn. So let's start with this first one, the way you choose a university. Now, in the United Kingdom, we have 2 bits of information that mean that compared really to the rest of the world, we can narrow down from all the possible universities out there to a pretty narrow shortlist fairly straightforwardly. The first bit of information is the course you want to go and study. And our experience with UK universities is such that we go to study a subject. The second bit of information are the entry requirements. So you can go onto ucas.com, lots of other tools that schools use, or indeed the university's own websites, and find out for this course, I must have these grades, A-level, IB, BTEC, or whatever else you might be studying. So for chemistry at Bristol, I can find it's this. For engineering at Warwick, I can find it's that. For French at King's College London, I can find it's that. And so it means that once you cross those 2 bits together, course of study, likely grades you're going to get in your last couple of years of school, you know the kind of types of universities that you're looking at. Now, the problem with the rest of the world beyond the UK is that either you don't have entry requirements or you don't apply for a single course of study. And so it gets much more complicated when you're having to think about the process of deciding where to apply. As a student going through this, you're going to have to learn to ask different questions than we might do in the UK of, do I have the grades? Does it have the course? And the US is a really good example of that. When we go to study at university in the USA, rather than just thinking about grades and course, you have to have this bigger sense of picking an experience, of going for university for the all-encompassing day in and day out experience of being a student there. Indeed, the university is selecting you on your match for the experience that they offer. And the three examples on the screen now show just how different those experiences can be. We have New York University, the one there, NYU with the purple flags. That's an extraordinarily urban university. What you will be doing at NYU academically will be very informed by the fact that it is in the center of Manhattan, that it's a busy, diverse, super lively, multicultural environment. And NYU are going to be looking for students who can kind of match that experience. That's a very different one from Dartmouth College you see in the middle of the screen. It's one of the Ivy League universities, so more traditional, more historic, and it's in a relatively small community of Hanover, New Hampshire. It's not a major metropolis. It's actually a couple of hours away from big population centers like New York and Boston. And therefore, the experience is going to be quite different. It's going to be much more focused on community. You're going to be seeing a lot of the same people day after day after day. And so that experience is going to be something that Dartmouth look for in the students coming in, to the point that, as well as your references written by teachers at school, Dartmouth also recommends that students submit what they call a peer reference, typically written by someone else in your year group at school, because that community aspect is such a big deal. And then you see the final picture here, the University of Michigan. That stadium there is absolutely vast. It's 100,000 people will fit into that stadium. And Michigan is an example of what America calls the college town, where there is a whole kind of urban community almost intrinsically linked to the fact that there is a university there. So the town of Ann Arbor in Michigan is consumed really by the university or all the goings on at the university. And that's, again, going to be a very different experience. You will see people wearing the colors, the blue and gold, people going to the game, shops and things, restaurants, hotels, all there serving the wider community of the university. So again, a very different experience. So when we're choosing a US university experience, it's got to be more than the academics come into it. There are bigger questions the students are going to have to consider. And that's why when we see the common application essay, the essay that students write that will go to almost all of their US universities, potentially all of them, these are the current prompts here in 2023 to get to the university in 2024. These are not questions asking you to describe your love of a single subject. It's questions really about who you are as a person. You have to answer one of these in 650 words. They're trying to figure out your values, your characteristics, what makes you, you. And then the university can see, do you match our experience? So a completely different way of conceiving of your university search, of your fit for the academics, the values, and the culture of a university. And there are other parts of this, other questions that you're going to have to answer for international universities that, again, you might not consider for the UK. For example, do you want to have an academic experience that is very comprehensive or quite specialized? Here in the UK, most of the universities are comprehensive. That means that they teach a wide variety of degrees. So you can go to most UK universities to study sciences, the maths, social sciences, the humanities, the arts, all sorts of things in there. And so they are delivering an experience that's very undergraduate focused on those students aged 19, 20, 21, 22 who've just left high school. There might be thousands of those students, and they're mixing together with all sorts of social activities and accommodation provision, which is very focused on the needs of people straight out of high school. Well, those are wonderful experiences, and the rest of the world has many, many universities like that. But we also see internationally is a greater preponderance of more specialized academic universities. In the UK, we tend to know of music schools, art schools, drama schools, where they're only teaching a narrow group of subjects. But around the world, we have similarly kind of small specialist institutions, but in other kind of areas. For example, what you see here is Caltech, the California Institute of Technology. And there are places like Algebra University College, the Carl Benz School of Engineering, Hotel School, The Hague, Power West Digital Arts and Entertainment. And they are very focused on delivering maybe a narrow area of academics at the undergraduate level, but perhaps more courses at the postgraduate level, so people doing master's degrees or MBAs. Now, if that university is delivering maybe only 1 or 2 degrees that students can do straight from high school, but a lot of things that people who are older, perhaps working professionals, can do, then it's going to have a very different culture of university. The social life will certainly be quite different. The accommodation could potentially be also very different. And the whole kind of environment of being a student in a university like that can feel very different. If you want to go to somewhere that's really only offering a bachelor's in business administration, the focus and the culture is going to be very business-led. It's going to be very entrepreneurial, and you might find that there is an expectation that you come in business dress to university. Now, that might be something that you really want. You want to go to a university that does have that real focus on one specialist area. But you might prefer to be with people from different academic disciplines to have something that's offering a greater variety of experiences to those people straight from high school. And I'll come back to Caltech as an example. Caltech is only bringing in 256 new undergraduates each year, but it has many, many more students doing their master's degrees, doing their PhDs, and actually people doing their own research as professors. The joke at Caltech is that being an undergraduate at Caltech is like being a wart on the side of a rhinoceros, that you physically exist, but no one's paying you much attention. So you've got to understand about these different cultures that come into it. And expanding that slightly more, another question that you're going to have to then consider is actually whether you want a residential experience at all. Now, that might glitch with some people's understanding because it's so baked into our UK university experience about going away from home for university. People tend to go within 2 or 3 hours travel time of home. But as this data from the Higher Education Policy Institute shows, actually the UK has a pretty high relative number of students who go away for university. In other parts of the world, there is a more normal experience of perhaps living at home or just going to university in your hometown, but living with a group of friends from school. And so we find that actually we can't take it for granted that every country will have the idea of being at university involves the residential side of things. So living at university, learning how to cook for yourself and do all the chores, budget and things, that might not be the case. For example, in many public universities in continental Europe, the universities don't provide any accommodation at all. Now, there is accommodation available in those cities, but it's the student kind of sorting it out themselves. You might find the universities don't have sports teams or orchestras or any of these clubs and societies as well. And that might be something that you really want. You want to just go to university for the academics. But again, we can't just assume that every country is going to deliver it in exactly the same way. And then the last point in the shortlisting idea of how you pick where to apply is that if you are looking beyond the UK, you really do need to have this conversation with whoever it is that funds your life right now of money. Now, if you're an international student at school in the UK, this will be something you're already aware of, because you will have this sense that I am going to have to pay for university if I want to stay in the UK. But for those students who might be relying on the UK student loan and those discounted fees of £9,250 that the government is subsidising a little bit, I need to point out that your student loan is not portable outside of the UK. You can't take that student loan funding unless you happen to be from the Channel Islands and use it towards an international degree. So being honest, most students who are going to an international university are funding it from the family. Your parents or guardians tend to be the ones who are paying for you to go. Now, if that's not something that's really an option for you, then you're going to have to think about other ways of doing this. You might have a passport or residency in a country that means you can access cheaper fees somewhere or indeed funding from that country. So as one example, students with an EU passport can study in the Netherlands, loads of degrees teaching in English, you don't need to know a word of Dutch, but for a tuition fee that's between 5,000 and 6,000 euros for a full 3-year bachelor's degree. That's a pretty good deal. Another one, students with French passports or from Francophone areas can study in Quebec. This is a photo of Bishop's University in Quebec for domestic Canadian tuition fees, significantly reduced amount of money than an international student would pay because France and Quebec have a deal. Now, if that isn't a situation that you'll fall into, but you still need money to go abroad, you're going to have to understand that some universities will offer need-based aid, some will offer merit scholarship, but many will offer no funding at all if you want a student from that country. Need-based aid is where a university will look at your family's finances, the income, the assets, the household expenditure, and say, okay, well, based on that, this is what we believe is fair to charge you. If you are from a relatively well-off background and the university you want to target is only offering need-based aid, then you might not qualify for as much as your family would like you to. So you need to really delve into that. Other universities offer merit scholarships where you get money for having merit in the eyes of the university. That means the university is looking at its standard applicant pool and saying, well, you look like one of the really good people in that applicant pool. You have merit in our eyes. That can be in things like sport, and many of you will know America is very generous. Some of the really talented athletes who are perhaps better than what the university can find more locally can get a sports scholarship to a university. There are many academic scholarships as well. But with that, what needs to be understood is this is going to be competitive, and you don't get money for just being a standard applicant to that university. You need to be one of the really best ones. And so possibly there are trade-offs to be made for a student in terms of looking for money when they go overseas. Okay, the second of my 4 points was how your academics work, that what you study can be different when you go internationally as well. At the university, guys, we've identified 4 different types of curriculums, and then an interdisciplinary model, which is also coming as very interesting. In the UK, we tend to have single or joint honours, where you go and study a defined course, but there are other pathways around the world, faculty or programme-led, where you're having a broader academic experience around a theme, double degrees where different things are stuck together, the liberal arts and sciences, which I'll talk about in more detail, and increasingly this additional one, the interdisciplinary pathways that we go. Now, in a single or joint honours pathway, you have applied to the course. It's like going for a set menu at a restaurant. You are going to take something that's already been ordered for you. So if you're saying to 5 universities on UCAS that I want to come and study mechanical engineering, then you get there and they're delivering mechanical engineering degree to you. So you've got typically a 3-year degree, sometimes more, with a set of compulsory modules and then some optional modules, but from a defined list of studies. And there are many countries around the world that will offer a degree that works on a very similar basis to that. But we have other ways it works as well. In Canada, Hong Kong, and Australia, we have the faculty or program-led experience where you're applying into a program, a theme of study around an academic discipline. So rather than, say, going to McGill University, as you see here, for history or French or philosophy, you just go for Bachelor of Arts. Commerce has all the business degrees, and engineering and science are fairly self-explanatory. And so what that means is you're applying into a multi-subject program where within an academic theme, you have a buffet-style experience. As you can see from the little pie charts we've got here, you'll have different ways that works. So Bachelor of Arts, you'll have some of it, which is your major, your kind of focus of your specialism. You'll have a minor, which will be some of it, and then you'll have some free choice. The Bachelor of Science, you can see, is a major and electives. In the Bachelor of Commerce, you might have your specialization and then some electives alongside it. But it's the ability to have that focused academic experience, but perhaps not have made that choice at the point of application. And then the ability to also bring in other things as you study, which can be very appealing to students as they go. Those interdisciplinary degrees are really interesting. They tend to work around a theme or a challenge or a global question that students need answering. These are becoming really interesting and really innovative. And what you'll find is that you're going to have a whole set of interdisciplinary experiences, sometimes on a set menu style, sometimes on a buffet pick and mix your courses style, around this thematic experience as we go. And then we have the completely different option, the liberal arts and sciences. This is really how almost every US university offers their degree. Whereas rather than having a defined set of things you have to study, students are combining 3 different parts of a degree together. Now, a third of it will be your major, typically your specialism. Now, that might fill more than that at a specialized university, potentially 50 or 60% of your classes. But that's where you are saying, this is the thing I want to focus on. And typically that would be something that you would nominate in your second year of a 4-year degree, and might have a capstone thesis that comes on top of it as well. But that is not the only thing that a liberal arts and science university like those in the US is going to really want you to do, because the big blue bit that you see here is the core or the general education. And these are where the US system is so different from other parts of the world, because the universities are going to force you to study another range of academic subjects across the disciplines. So students going to almost every US university will still have to prove that they can do literature, foreign language, maths, sciences, the humanities, social sciences, the arts, and in many cases also physical education. Now, how strict or loose they are depends on the university, but that's a very different experience. You think of the UK one, that a student who really wants to do engineering probably gave up a lot of their humanities, literature, languages after GCSE. And then you go to a university like MIT or Harvard or indeed Caltech, and they're still having to take foreign language, a humanities class, write extended essays on literature. So it's a completely different way in which a degree structure works. The final component is that students have free choice to take some electives, or indeed can try and combine things to get a minor. But this complete pick and mix buffet style of educational experience, with at the middle of it, this definition from a university about how they need to see students with academic breadth, is such a different idea of how your studies work than in the UK. And to take that a step further, because the US is such a better option, within that bit that's defined, within that core or general education, different universities will specify it in different ways. You will find a lot of places like MIT and Harvard will have a fairly standard curriculum where about a third of your classes do have to be spent on those things. Choosing MIT here deliberately, students at MIT are still studying foreign language, humanities, the arts, the social sciences. It's not what many students in the UK think it is, of completely maths and engineering and stuff. You still have to do those kind of things. But there are other varieties of this. You have an open curriculum, quite unusual in the US, but Brown does offer this, where actually the university does not make any requirements on what you must study. You prove you can write, you take a lot of classes, you have a specialism, and you're fine. The opposite experience of that is a very fixed curriculum, like we see at Columbia University, where it's not just saying you must study these subjects, you must take a history class, but here's 80 to choose from. Columbia is actually defining down to the very books the things that every student in their arts and science college must study. So if you are in that main bit of Columbia University, you will be reading parts of the Bible and some works of Shakespeare and philosophy by some of the great Greek and Latin philosophers. Whether you're a maths major or a physics major or a classics major, that is part of the degree. And so understanding that, if that's the university you're applying to, that is so different from a single or joint honours. Now we have more specialized places, for example, somewhere like Cornell, which has a number of different colleges that you must choose to apply to, where depending on which bit of it you're in, or maybe you're in a standalone place like Babson College, for example, a business school only on its own, but there will still be the fact that you have to take other classes outside your main subject area. Now, overlooking this or not really understanding this is one of the biggest mistakes we find when students are applying to the US. You are not applying for a subject, as well as that cultural experience I mentioned earlier. You're also applying for a wider academic experience that comes here. And then there are other questions with the academics to consider as well. If we come back to continental Europe, what we'll start to come across with is, in many cases, two different types of university within a country. We have research universities, typically like we might find in the UK, where you go to university to study theory. It's academic, it's exams-based, it's about content, and in effect, what you're being educated to do is to answer questions that start with why. Why do these chemicals react like that? Or why was that battle fought in a certain way? And that's a wonderful experience for many students. But Europe also has applied universities, and crucially, compared to the UK, applied universities that are very well regarded, they have parity of esteem within kind of popular culture. They do lead on to master's degrees and professional jobs in certain pathways. And those are universities where it's not about why, it's about how. How do we start up a new business? How do we get better at writing marketing campaigns? How do I improve my skills as an artist or help somebody recover from injuries better? And so when you see the different courses in the final bullet points on each slide here, you can see that actually they are different types of educational experience for different types of students. And so all around the world, we're finding different types of institutions in terms of their academic things. Are they focused? Are they specialist? Are they research? Are they applied? Are they liberal arts? Are they more focused on a program-led approach of different universities in different parts of the world, where the academic experience is not going to be exactly the same? And so if we're trying to build university lists where a lot of the same materials are going to the same universities, we need to be conscious of making sure that academically students are applying for the same thing. In exactly the same way as you wouldn't send a UCAS statement off for engineering at 2 universities, French at another 2, and painting at a 5th, because the statement's going to not really do the job. Well, internationally, if you're applying to systems within different countries, we need to understand that the materials you're sending need to be tailored to the particular type of academics of a university. And if you are interested in the road less traveled, if going out to Asia and beyond is something that interests you, then please also bear in mind that we'll have completely different cultures of things out there. Loads of English taught degrees in Japan and Hong Kong and Singapore, but it's all going to be different. And that liberal arts model I mentioned that we find in the US is spreading around the world. We have the School of International Liberal Studies at Waseda, so a local university offering now liberal arts. We have new universities set up to provide the liberal arts, like Ashoka in India. And we have a lot of American universities who've set up campuses in other parts of the world where you get that American degree, but in a different part of the world, such as New York University's Abu Dhabi campus. We have universities where actually you move around the world as part of your degree. For example, the World Bachelor in Business, which is a 4-year business degree where you spend time at 3 different universities, a year at USC in Los Angeles, a year at this university, HKUST in Hong Kong, a year at Bocconi in Milan, and then you have a free choice of where you go back. And we have universities where the whole travel is such a big part of it as well, where you can start 2 years at one, 2 years at another, or even Minerva University, where students go to 7 different world cities as part of their degree. I'll also mention at this point, if you are looking in Australia and New Zealand, that the timelines are also something to be aware of, because their summer is the Northern Hemisphere winter, that their academic year typically runs February through to November, December. So the academic year is going to maybe present some challenges in terms of when you might apply, are you holding offers in another country, and indeed when you graduate. Okay, the third of the 4 points is what makes a university good. How do we find that side of the process? And this is again where stuff can sometimes get lost in translation. Terms like Ivy League and Russell Group get really, really tricky because we use them without perhaps fully understanding what they mean. For example, the Ivy League is not the best 8 universities in America. It's 8 very good universities who are geographically relatively close to each other and compete against each other in a sports competition. So things like rankings and entry requirements, this idea of a top university, get really tricky. Now, one of the really crucial things to understand here is that around the world, most universities are of a similar kind of size in terms of their undergraduate populations. Most universities will be looking to bring in somewhere between maybe 2 and 6 or 7,000 new students each year. Some might be a little bit smaller than that. There'll be many that are bigger than that, but that's of the sort of really famous universities, what they're bringing in. Now, what's different is the number of students who are competing for those spots. If we look at someone like the United States, which is significantly bigger than the UK, it's therefore going to be much harder to access some of the highest ranked universities. For example, a tweet here from Harvard University. America graduates 4.3 million high schoolers each year. 4.3 million students finish high school in America each year. So therefore, it's not surprising that you can see here that from the 2,000 spots Harvard was looking for students to enter in 2022, 8,000 Americans had a perfect grade point average and applied there. Now, what does that mean in UK terms? It means that student did their year 10 exams, got perfect scores, did their GCSEs, got straight 9s, did their year 12 exams, got perfect scores, did their school leaving exams, A-levels, BTEC, IB, and got the highest possible results. Now, that's a pretty high bar. And yet you can see just from Americans applying to Harvard, that didn't make anybody special. There's more that goes on top of that. And that's because for a university bringing in around 2,000 students, but with 4.3 million potential students, being good in a much bigger cohort is going to feel quite differently. So if we say that each year around 20,000 students get a perfect SAT score, and we compare the admissions rates to some of these universities, Oxford and Cambridge versus some of their US peers, it's going to be significantly harder to get into somewhere that's really famous in that country. But on the flip side of it, given that most of the super talented students, if you think of the top 10% of the cohorts of students graduating schools in America, that's 430,000 students. Those students are exceptional students, high achieving students. They're going to have to go to a lot of universities and make those universities good, and therefore they could be good places to look at. We also have it the other way, where we have a much smaller population. So Ireland has only around 70,000 students who go through their admission system each year. It therefore has many smaller research universities. It also has some applied ones. And therefore you find it might be perhaps easier in some ways to access their best universities, because the universities are a similar size to what we've seen in the US, but there are fewer students competing to access them. And then if we go to other parts of the world, we end up with systems where selection actually isn't really a thing at all. In continental Europe, because of the culture of their high school systems, where students are sort of streamed into different types of high school at age 12, 13, 14, we kind of have students almost pre-selected for university. The photo you see here is KU Leuven. This is a wonderful university in Belgium with 5 degrees taught in English. That is a university that ranks very highly in the world, sometimes hits the world's top 50s. And yet they will admit you with relatively minimal grades, 3 Cs at A-level or passing an IB diploma. And it's what in that lovely European culture they call selection after the gate. Imagine in the US and Canada and Australia and the UK, there's a very narrow gap through which you have to squeeze into university, and standing in front of that, a lot of admissions officers wanting to see a lot of information about you before they decide which few can come in. In this kind of place, there's a very large gate to get in. They will see that you are minimally qualified to get in, and maybe you're eligible by having taken the right subjects. However, what's then got to happen after that is you've got to perform well at university, potentially get really high marks at the end of the first year in order to stay. Then if I come back to those specialist universities, what we're going to find is all sorts of different pathways in there as well. If the university is very focused on one subject area, you would expect their selection procedure to focus on that subject area. For example, this university here, the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, a really famous Swiss hospitality management university, training people to run luxury hotels and all those kind of things. That's not really a book style university. It's a very people skills university. And so their admissions process is going to revolve around doing all sorts of things that are very people focused. They're going to be team building activities. You're going to have to interview. So whether you've got super strong grades from school, less strong grades from school is less relevant in an admissions process that works in this way. And then my final point, just to wrap things up, is how the applications work. It's really important I say they don't work like UCAS. They're not on UCAS, and international applications won't count to your 5 options that you will have on UCAS. These will be potentially additional to UCAS. Now, you find that there are some countries that have similar systems to UCAS. The Netherlands or Ireland or Sweden will have government-run admission systems that you most likely will have to deal with. Other parts of the world will have ranges of systems, either because it's divided into where in the country the university is, like in Canada, Ontario University of OUAC, British Columbia has Apply-BC, or because the university is making a choice about which system to use, like in the USA. But we also find that many expect direct applications. So in some countries, you are having to deal with lots of different application systems. And so you've got to understand that every country is going to be different. You need to get ahead early of figuring out when the deadlines will be. What paperwork will I have to provide? What paperwork will my school have to provide? And understand the nuances of each process in terms of all the dates and timelines. In that, you're also going to have to see there's no standard process for your writing. It's not like you're sending your UCAS personal statement everywhere. You might have to do something like a UCAS statement, a motivational letter, but tailored to the needs of each university. You might have to send a CV, you might have to do more creative or academic writing like I showed you for the US, or there might be questions unique for each degree where the university is asking you to answer all sorts of different things to help them decide who comes. You have to make sure it all works together. How do your current commitments fit in with everything else? How do your aspirations fit with the data points the school will have to send about you? If there's no standard application procedure, you might find the applications open earlier or later than you might expect. And how you might have to respond to offers in terms of, is there a deposit you have to pay? Does applying to this university and being accepted mean I can't apply to other universities? And indeed, when do I have to send them final results? Can also be quite complicated. Now, to wrap things up, I've thrown a lot of information at you, but hopefully it's been a good way of being introduced into international universities. If you do want to know more, our website, theuniversityguide.com, is freely available for you to go on to use the search tool, our knowledge pages as well, to find information out about all sorts of different options. We run a 3-stage process of supporting students with this to, first of all, explore where in the world they want to go, based on that shortlist to then prepare to become a really good applicant, and finally making sure that in the apply stage, every element of the application works to your advantage. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I hope this has been a useful session. And if you do want to get in touch and find out more about our services at the University Guys, please drop me an email, david@theuniversityguys.com. Thank you very much.